Today we're going to be talking about some of the best weapons in Fortnite Save the World to kill mini-bosses. If you're using a ranged weapon, it's the pot shot, and if it's a smokescreen mini-boss, you want to use the Ravager. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, but if you don't have those two weapons, let's talk about some of the other best weapons in the game. Just to elaborate on that, the pot shot is the highest single target damage weapon in the game, on par with the Storm King's Wrath. The Storm King's Wrath is an energy-based weapon, and it's a bit more expensive with the energy cells, and it's a bit harder to calculate it because of the energy management, so damage per second is hard to compare on my side of things when I'm trying to be correct and accurate, but the Storm King's Wrath will crush a mini-boss if you have it available to you, and the pot shot is an excellent choice. However, these are two weapons that are highly unobtainable. The Storm King's Wrath is a mythic weapon, so unless you're a noob who got carried way further than you should have been, or you're an endgame player, you just don't have that weapon available, and the pot shot is kind of a spy weapon that you need to get out of the llamas, or you need to research it out of the book, and that's an excellent choice, but not everybody has those weapons available. If you're watching this video, it's very likely that you're in Canny or lower, or you're just early on into Twine and you don't have those kind of resources, or maybe you just like Spice and you want the alternatives. Now, the other thing I mentioned is the Storm King's Ravager. It is by far the best melee in the entire game, hands down. And when you are going up against a smokescreen mini-boss, you do not want to use a ranged weapon. They will do about 75% less damage, so when you do see that giant smokescreen, I want you to know a few things. First, use your ability. If you're running a soldier build with a minigun or lefty and righty, ninjas don't have that much, but you could throw throwing stars real quick, or if you're a constructor, maybe the rosy turret is pretty good because abilities don't get that reduced damage. But once that ability runs out, you want to use a melee because that will not have the reduced damage, and melees are very good even without a loadout. So if everybody in a perfect environment uses the Storm King's Ravager, it'll go down very easily. But rest assured, I understand it's also a mythic weapon that not everybody has available to them, and even if you have the Ravager, you might not have it perked exactly right. There are several different ways to do it. I'm going to link my best perks video down below. I personally have 3 144 copies because I run different perks for lots of different reasons, and I usually have at least 4 crafted at any given time with different perk setups. So if you don't have one ready to go at all times, there are lots of other base game melees that'll do a fantastic job, and we'll be talking about that later on in the video. And one more note for smokescreen mini-bosses is that they are always physical. This is extremely important to know. So when you're going up against a smokescreen mini-boss, you always want a physical Ravager or whatever melee you have available to you. Some melees are locked to energy, and that's fine. We'll talk about that later on. The only time I'd recommend using an element is if you're using a loadout to boost a certain melee, and that goes for all weapons in the entire game. If you're running any loadout that specifically buffs a weapon, say you're running an AR build, SMG build, shotgun, bows, whatever, and you are using Toy Rockin' Out and heroes that are supporting that weapon, in most cases when you're going up against a mini-boss, simply using that weapon that you are building your loadout around is going to do a great job versus the mini-boss, and you always want to match the element. Mini-bosses that are not smokescreen can be any element, so fire, nature, water, or just normal physical, and that will matter greatly. If you're going up against a water enemy and you are using a fire weapon, that's not going to be a good thing. You need to back off and maybe try an energy weapon that'll do very well. So a lot of my top suggestions are going to be multi-element weapons like the pot shot and many others that I'll mention later on. And that's where if you're using a melee build, using the correct element will go a very long way. Even the Storm King's Ravager, as much as I praise it, can be at best energy. So if you've got a physical one crafted and prepared for mini bosses, you might actually not want to use it even if you're running a melee build going up against a mini boss that has a specific element, because that Ravager will be doing half damage. Now, on the topic of loadouts, I want to mention that today's list that I'm going to be talking about are all no loadout weapons. We did a lot of math, me and AS407, huge credit to him. Big thank you for all the melee math that he did. The description is going to be filled with everything. He covered about 45 different weapons, and I'm only going to be showing like 7 or 8 that I think are viable for everybody. But we did a lot of math with the intention of not applying any loadouts to these weapons, because I'm imagining you're running a constructor or whatever build, you see a mini boss, and you need to pull out something that will just work no matter what you're using. And that's why I'm also not going to be using very many single element weapons. So if it's locked to nature, if it's locked to fire, it's likely not on this list. And I'll address those exceptions as we go. The last thing I want to mention is, of course, if there's a trap vulnerable mini-boss, you do not want to shoot it or use a melee at all. Just use whatever traps you have already placed in your base. I hope you've got some tar pits somewhere. And I know for years we've been boxing them in with broadsides. I myself have popularized that kind of attitude. I don't typically recommend that anymore, just for a very nerdy reason. If you box in a mini-boss with 4 walls of broadsides facing inwards, yeah, the mini-boss will probably die pretty quickly, but now you've obstructed your defense and you've put up 4 4 walls that are just blocking the flow of enemies, and once those walls get broken open by a smasher or a propane, your broadsides will be shooting off into nothing, which we all know is not good, right? The cannonballs bounce, people. So in the modern day, I actually recommend, if you're not just going to use your normal traps, wall darts. If you place them with gaps in between and just let the mini-boss slowly walk through them, a trap vulnerable mini-boss will go down pretty consistently to that, and it'll leave behind traps that are still going to be very effective to the oncoming enemies once the mini-boss is gone. So trap vulnerable, just use traps. Shocker, right? Don't shoot it. It's a waste of ammo. It's a waste of everybody's time, and your teammates will make fun of you, and I honestly can't blame them. So at this point in the video, we have established that you're not using the pot shot, you're not using the Ravager, you don't have a specific loadout that is boosting a weapon that is good for the mini-boss you're up against. What do you use? Let's talk about some of the best ranged weapons in the game, and then we're going to move on to some special cases and some melees down the line. When it comes to killing mini-bosses quickly, if you're just talking about the raw damage of the weapons in Fortnite Save the World, you've basically got 2 categories that matter the most: shotguns and launchers. When it comes to shotguns, here are my top suggestions. If you guys want best shotguns video, link to that down below, but here are the weapons I'm going to suggest for going up against mini-bosses. The Huskbuster is my #1 recommended weapon in the entire game for killing mini-bosses. Not because it's the highest DPS, some of the launchers actually beat it there, but it is so accessible. It's a scavenger weapon, so it's kind of cheap. Its damage per second is monstrously high. Don't get that twisted. It can be any element, and of course the perks are fantastic. It is just a really, really great all-around weapon. And as to not be too redundant, I'm going to mention the ground pounder. It is excellent. It's just a faster firing version of the Huskbuster with slightly less ammo and slightly less damage per shot. So the Huskbuster is basically the slower firing, harder hitting weapon, but the ground pounder is faster firing, less damage per shot. And technically the 2 weapons have the same DPS with no loadout boosting it. But as I mentioned, if you do have a loadout boosting your primary, for example, if you're running a shotgun loadout with totally rocking out active, the ground pounder does pull ahead by about 20%. It's an extremely strong weapon. Both are fantastic. And of course, the pop shot. These are the 3 shotguns I mention in almost every video. I know I'm a broken record about it, but these weapons are monsters. So the pop shot, not to be confused with the pot shot. There's a pot shot launcher and a pop shot shotgun. Pictures on screen are hopefully helping. It's a fast firing, fast reloading shotgun that also does a great job, has all the elements and all the nice stuff with it. Now, if you don't have the big 3 shotguns right there are 2 more alternatives that I want you to consider. The first one is the room sweeper. I'm happy to say this is another base game weapon, just like the Huskbuster, that you can get in regular missions almost every day, if not every week. The room sweeper is a fast firing shotgun. Note, you will be spending a lot of energy cells to kill any mini boss that you see, but it'll do really, really good damage. And I should note the gameplay that I've been showing in today's video is a war game situation. This is me going up against mini bosses solo in like a party of 4. So these mini bosses do have significantly less health than what we would expect in a power level 164 player mission. Generally, I'm showing footage from 250 power level enemies, but I had about 40 different weapons to record for today, and you guys are only seeing some of it, and I just could not spend 10 hours getting real world gameplay. So when you are seeing these mini bosses that I'm soloing, they're basically like a quarter of the health of a normal mini boss. So you can imagine the amount of time it takes me to solo these mini bosses should be how long it roughly takes to kill them, assuming everybody on your team is helping. I know that's a tall order for public missions. If you're having struggles in your missions and you need more people to play with, the My Number Discord, linked in the description down below, is my community. It's very, very generous, very welcoming. If you let people know what your power level is and what missions you're trying to run, it's highly likely that you'll be able to get a game. But the room sweeper is a fantastic pick. It can be any element. It's really, really good. Now, a slightly lower DPS version of the room sweeper is the Tiger Jaw. So it is technically a little weaker, but it does do more damage per shot. So it's going to conserve your ammo just a bit more. So it's like it's more damage per shell, but less overall damage per second, because the Tiger Jaw does shoot a little slower and you'll be reloading a bit more often, but it does do a really, really good job. So 2 fully automatic shotguns that I recommend using are the room sweeper and the Tiger Jaw. They should take care of mini bosses fairly well without any loadout at all. Now, as I mentioned, shotguns and launchers. I'm not going to be mentioning any specific ARs, SMGs, pistols, snipers, because when I did a bunch of math, they just didn't quite hold up. Like, some of the best ARs I did the math on were like the floor flusher with a matching element and the pain train, and the damage per second on those was way less than the shotguns that I was doing the math for. So you can use some of the best ARs in the game. I will link my top 10 best weapons video in the description down below. If you don't have any weapon that I'm going to be mentioning in today's video, that is an excellent resource, because the best weapons of the game, believe it or not, do pretty well versus mini bosses. Who would have known? So that's partially why I've put off making this video for so long, because the top 10 best weapons kind of are the best weapons for mini bosses, but the top 10 best weapons is considering normal missions where you'll be going up against crowds of normal enemies, and AoE is a lot more effective in those situations where it's completely irrelevant when you're focusing on a mini boss. So that's why today's list is a little bit different, but I just wanted to say the top 10 list is linked down below if you guys need some more resources. So those are my top recommended shotguns. Most shotguns in this game are pretty good. If you have a preferred one like the Browbeater or the Double Boiler that you want to use instead, those are excellent as well. Just know that the Browbeater I recommend using double pump, so it's a little bit more setup, but it is very, very strong. It might not kill a mini boss before you have to stop and reload, so just consider that, but there are many, many better options. I just needed to crunch this list down into something that was at least bite-sized for a video. Let's talk about the best launchers. It's actually a pretty short list, but here we go. The Jabberwocky is my #1 recommended launcher underneath the pot shot. It is tricky to suggest because its base damage is about as good as the Santa's Little Helper. However, it explodes into 3 more cannonballs that do the same amount of damage as the original. So you can, in theory, quadruple your damage versus a single target. Now, boxing into Miniboss is tricky. They like to break walls. They like to teleport. Building blocker exists. I'm not saying the Jabberwocky will always work, but 2 things are worth considering. It is a high damage launcher that can quadruple its damage if you get lucky, and it can be any element. So if you don't have the pot shot and you've managed to get 4 Jabberwockies, which, by the way, good job. It's a weekly event item that does not come around consistently, and you need to voucher it, and it's tricky to get, but it's very, very good if you have it. So consider that if you will. And so long as we're setting up to kill a mini boss, the Dessa Blaster is one of my favorite suggestions. It's a weapon that not a lot of people think about. It's just the sound boombox launcher, but it can bounce up and down 5 times. So if you have a 1 tile gap between the one that you're hitting and the one where it's bouncing, you can go side to side or up and down in a box, and it'll hit for 5 times, quintupling every single shot that you take. That is really, really effective. It takes a bit of work, and a Dessa Blaster with 4 different elements might be tricky considering we get it once per year, but it's something to consider. Maybe you make a physical copy and you try your best. It is an option. You can make it energy if you want to get as diverse as possible. It's just something that I think will help you. And a surprise pick, the one that I had not expected to be as good as it was, is the Easter egg launcher. No, I am not joking. When I did math on the Thumper, on the Cannonade, on the V6 launcher, all of those 3 were worse than the shotguns that I recommended earlier, meaning you are spending rocket ammo to do less damage than a shotgun would have done with shotgun shells. That's not very economic if you're going to be spamming a mini boss, but the Easter egg launcher won out. It's got a higher DPS than the Room Sweeper. It's right there. So if you have the Easter egg launcher, it actually does well. It's a funny pick, but it is there. Now, these are the special exceptions that I mentioned earlier. The Dirge Song and the Blackout AR. If you guys have been subscribed for any amount of time, you have definitely heard about these weapons. They are very specific edge cases where when you have low health and you are shooting a black metal weapon where reloading hurts you and cues up a big explosion, that explosion is a monster. It is incredibly strong, and it has led to a video, multiple videos actually on my channel, where I have called it the strongest loadout in the game. The Dirge Song is my current recommended weapon. Without any special loadout at all, it will do lots of damage with small ammo, and you can take down a mini boss with the correct element. I just have to mention it because the weapon is so uniquely powerful in its weird way, but it can only be physical or fire, which does limit its availability, but the damage is so high that it might not matter. I figured I'd have to at least mention it in a video like this, and of course, video down below explains more about that loadout, more of the history of these things. It all started out with that weapon, and then I favored the Blackout AR for a bit, and then the energy generation of Fall in Love with Your Jones, it got nerfed, so now we're back to the Dirge Song. It's a bit messy, but these weapons are extremely strong, and you should at least consider the Dirge Song and the Blackout AR if you have them set up. Now let's talk about melees. This is going to be a pretty simple section of the video. So as I mentioned in the intro, if you see a smokescreen mini boss, you should definitely not be using a ranged weapon. You will do significantly less damage. And those smokescreen mini bosses are always physical. So you should definitely use whatever ability you have. Minigun lefty and righty do great if you're a soldier. If you're a ninja or an outlander, not so much, but you can at least throw down the teddy, right? If you see a smokescreen mini boss, you want to use these following melees. Like I said, AS47, thank you so much. He's a melee expert in our community, and I deferred to him hugely. We worked together to make this list, and there's about 45 weapons on here. I'm going to put it all in the description down below because it's way too much to talk about. I picked out a few that stood out to me when I was testing them. So the #1 DPS melee, based on our math, this is not conclusive worldwide, but this is what we came up with, is the Sir Lancelot, which is a really tough weapon to get. It only comes in the weekly shop randomly, but you might have a copy. If you are somebody who bought the bundle that gave you the Scrapper Spear, same weapon, by the way, so there you go. Sir Lancelot with the damage crit rating, double crit damage, affliction is really, really good. The heavy attack no longer pushes around mini bosses, but the raw DPS of just the main attack was really, really nice. And it could be any element. That's going to be a through line through this, so there are some weapons that are energy only that I'll be talking about, but everything else I'm going to mention, so I don't have to keep repeating it, is any element. Guardian's Will is the second one. Another medieval weapon. I know, they just have some strong melees. The heavy attack is useless because of the lunge, but the main attack is just very good. That's all I can say. I'm going to show the perks for these, I think, every time, but it just works. It just works. The Supersonic Slasher is a holiday weapon, a little bit less accessible because of the event, but it is very, very strong. And this one is tricky to calculate, but the heavy attack does a really good job. It does a few swinging motions and then it shoots like bullets out of the end of the weapon. That can be a monster. I actually got a clip where it crit on almost everything I did and chunked the mini boss like halfway down. That is awesome. Seeing as these are war games mini bosses, you could imagine in the 160 zones, that would have been like an eighth of its health from one heavy attack. Of course, the Storm King's Ravager can do that very comfortably, but we're ignoring that for now. Supersonic Slasher, if you've got it, is a very strong choice. Now, I am skipping down on the DPS list just a bit. There are some technically higher damage weapons that you can defer to in the description down below, but these are base game weapons that are regularly available. And if you're watching this video, I feel like that is the most accessible and most relevant to this discussion. So starting with the Farmer's Glory. I don't have any footage for this one. I can show an old video with the crits causing explosion, link down below, but it's a fun weapon. With damage, crit rating, crit damage, damage to afflicted, and affliction, it's actually a pretty decent weapon. It'll take down a mini boss pretty well. And then what I do have footage for is the Stormblade. Note that the Stormblade has identical stats to the Vindertech Slicer. So with the exact same perks, the weapons are truly identical down to the decimal. The Stormblade is a weapon that we typically have for crit hits causing explosion. While that loadout is fantastic, link down below, affliction is actually what you want to be using when you're going up against a mini boss. Because that crit explosion requires different perks and the DPS doesn't always match it. It's also better for crowds. We are definitely wanting affliction here, and it does a really great job. The heavy attack is sometimes worth using. You might as well if you have the energy, but just laying into it with the normal fast attack does great. And the stab's worth a third. It is just another great melee. I'm going really quickly in this section because all melees are just swinging quick. Some of the launchers require setup. Some of the shotguns require something a little different. No, melees are just holding left click and sometimes right click. It's just as simple as that. Stab's worth a third does a great job. There are a lot of different perk options and they're all linked in the description down below, but damage, crit rating, crit damage, damage to afflicted, and affliction just does a fantastic job. And the Steam Thrasher, once again, there are some higher DPS weapons on this list, but the Steam Thrasher has that spin to win heavy attack, and you don't need to perk into it at all. Note that all of the footage that I've been recording today, I really wish I would have mentioned this sooner, was with loadouts that don't boost it at all. So all of my War Games footage is either with a shotgun loadout that was doing nothing for the melees that I've been demonstrating, or I was using a constructor build for my ranged weapons. I probably should make a note for that earlier in the video, but suffice to say that there is nothing boosting these weapons outside of them just doing their damage, and the heavy attack on the Steam Thrasher was fantastic. I recommend spinning and spinning and spinning until you run out of energy, and then just going back to the fast attack. And now I am skipping a few steps down the list, but the Klax. The Klax is a really, really fun weapon that I've been recommending for a long time. This weapon is really, really good with the correct loadout, and it's pretty dang good just for normal mini-boss killing. Again, you hold left click, and the mini-boss will die eventually. There are some decent picks in here as well, the Armageddon and the Reaper Scythe. There's so much on this list, I cannot plug the description enough, but that should at least cover it for some really, really good melees that'll get the job done. So there you go. Hey guys, so much for watching. These are some of my picks for the best mini-boss killers in the entire game, and or, you know, missed monster killers, since it's kind of the same list. If you guys want to comment down below with any suggestions or something I might have missed, let us know, and hopefully this helps you deal with some of the strongest enemies in the game, considering the Plasmatic Discharger kind of got a little bit recently. So a lot of people are trying to figure out how to handle these big enemies, and I just wanted to help out a little bit. So that's it. I'm out of here. Channel members get early access to fun videos, unlike this one. I try not to paywall like really good informative videos, but they do get a lot of entertaining stuff early. So if you guys want to support me, description down below. If you guys want to subscribe for more, then you should do that. Like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. And then